All right. So today we are going to talk about things that have to do with postpartum boundary setting and relationship care. And I asked Dr. Veronica Eyo, who is a licensed clinical social worker with years of experience treating adults and couples that struggle with a host of things, things like trauma, depression, anxiety, life transition stuff, which is kind of what we're focused in on today, relationship conflicts, parenting skills, social skills, and grief and loss. And because of her specialization in working with moms, both new and seasoned, as they navigate motherhood, she also has this attuned kind of piece of her practice that understands the in-depth stuff around managing symptoms of perinatal mental health. So both her master's and her doctoral degrees were completed through the University of Southern California, and her approach to therapy is collaborative, client-centered, and evidence-based. And those three descriptors are like music to my ears. I love that. That's like the sweet triad there. So thanks so much for saying yes to this conversation. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad to have this conversation and continue to have this conversation because we
Yeah,
need to have it. It's something that keeps evolving and changing. So I'm
it
glad to
sure
be here.
does. Yeah. Okay. So I just want to acknowledge for people who are entering kind of this phase of developing their family, growing their family. And in those early years, I just want to acknowledge how much really dramatically changes. Like it's a big swing in a number of ways. And this feels perhaps kind of shocking to your system when it's your first, right? Um,
Mhm.
and depending what you've read or who you've come into contact with or what you've watched other people kind of walk through in their own journey, you might have some built up expectation about what that's going to mean for you. So I find that one of the changes that actually catches new parents off guard is the changes in their relationship dynamics. So the established relationships they have either in their partnership or their extended family. And sometimes I hear parents talk about having envisioned something kind of specific, like, oh, my mom's going to show up and kind of move in for a month and help me out. Or I know who's going to be there in 2 years from now when I want to go back to work and who's going to do childcare for me. And I know how my partner is really responsive to me. So I have this idea about what this is going to look like. We're just going to kind of smoothly carry that through, after giving birth. So, but I noticed that a lot of people get to the other side and they find their resources are so depleted, they're fried. And then it's hard to set boundaries and realize, okay, this is not actually showing up in the way that I thought. So, because you do this work so much, can you talk a bit about like how that shows up and how that impacts people?
It shows up in a lot of sadness and disappointment
Yeah.
and just anxiety of like, what next? Here you are, you'd bring home this precious little baby,
Yeah.
amazing little one. And not only do you come in with expectations of how others will be, but also expectations of how you will be.
Oh, good call. Yeah.
And there is nothing like motherhood, parenthood to really humble you and just say, this is not it.
Cut you
This,
off at the knees. You thought you
yes,
had it, sister. What are you
no, yes, no, um, and so a lot of what I'm seeing in my practice is of people coming in, especially mothers coming in saying, I just, I'm just so angry at,
Yeah.
my mom couldn't show up in this way, or I thought that my parents were going to come and stay with me, or that they were going to, do this or do that. They didn't do any of that.
Yeah.
A lot of anxiety over, yeah, people did come, people are coming, but I'm so anxious when they're here. Like,
Yeah.
are they clean? Is my baby going to get sick? All they want to do is hold the baby.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking, what about the dishes, the laundry? I look like a hot mess. I haven't
Yeah.
showered.
Yeah.
Like, I can't keep a conversation.
Right. Haven't
All,
slept for 3 days.
yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
it's exhausting. How do I feel so ungrateful of saying like, I don't want you here. Like, I
Yeah.
actually just please leave me alone. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's hard because people come into therapy often with the idea that they're doing something wrong. Like, I'm doing
Mhm.
something as a mom because I'm not accepting this help. I
Yeah.
should be grateful that they drop in at 2:30 every day to watch the baby, but that's the time when the baby naps and I want to nap, but I can't
Yeah.
nap because
Because now I'm entertaining somebody.
yes,
Uh-huh.
yes,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
hard. It's hard because so how we start practice is, or my sessions is very much of saying like, it's not all you. Some of this is
Yeah.
like hard conversations to have, and some family members or even partners, it's understanding like some people are not aware of some of these things,
Yeah.
trying to give benefit of the doubt. Sometimes people are aware of it. That's a whole
Mhm.
different
Uh-huh.
conversation, right? Um,
I know
but
better.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Maybe we
and
need to talk about that down the road here today, because that I think that's a good one for boundary setting, right?
yes,
Uh,
yes, but it's like it's not all you. You didn't
yeah,
know this was an issue
that's right.
until you had a baby and
Yeah,
you realize, you know what? This is what I needed of support, or this I didn't need of
totally.
support, or, you know, this is what I need right now, or this is what I said I needed in the beginning. But now, fast forward 2 months, 3 months, my leave is over, or my husband's leave is over, and now
Yeah,
this is what I need.
yeah, it
And the
changes. Yeah.
struggle with like, how do I have these conversations with my partner, with my
Mhm.
family, with my friends, with my church? How do I kind of go about this? And so that's
Yeah.
kind of what I'm seeing. Long winded. It's like
Yeah,
it's all over the place of just feeling like, is it me? That's a big one. Is like,
yeah,
what is wrong with me? I should be grateful, and
yeah.
I need to be grateful.
So
And
they
it's
come in the door with guilt.
a lot of guilt,
So
a
yeah,
lot
it's that
of
inner tension, right? Like, it's the inner conflict of I want to welcome that. I don't want to hurt people's feelings. I know they're good intentions. They're not coming here to make it more difficult. And so, how, in the face of that, do I disrupt our relationship in some way by saying, right, there's these beliefs that if I'm honest about what I need or I shape that myself, then I'm hurting people.
it. Hmm.
And that's added pressure. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. That's
yeah.
hard.
It's
Yeah.
it's so hard, and we all have it. I will say,
Yeah.
even myself, in those
Yeah.
things of like, it's again, we don't like conflict, and I feel like that's
Mhm.
so unfortunate sometimes when we think of
Yes. Yeah.
stating your needs as if it's conflict, but that's
Yeah.
what we think of and that's what
Yeah.
we feel. It feels like that sometimes.
Yeah.
And when later on, when we start talking about like how to set these boundaries and stuff,
Mhm.
it's like there's a bodily feeling that you feel, and
Yeah.
then there's the, okay, let's practice and kind of do this, and set those boundaries, because ultimately sometimes, you want to bank on or trust that this person loves me enough or cares
Mm.
about me enough, that regardless of how I set, me setting this boundary or having this conversation
Yeah.
about what boundary I would like. Because sometimes you don't know what boundary you want to set.
No.
I
That's that,
remember
yeah.
those early days. I didn't
Yeah.
know.
I don't know what I need.
I don't
I
know.
I know this isn't it, but I
Yes,
don't know. The way you showed
yes,
up is not what I need. I
yes,
feel that
yeah,
strong. Yeah.
yeah. So it's like you want to have that conversation, which on
Yeah.
the receiving end is also hard in itself, because you're like,
Totally.
how
I
do you
showed
help?
up for you. I
But
know.
yes, but
Yeah.
that's life. Like, this
Yeah.
is so complex, and that's also how you deepen relationships, is of showing up and having those conversations and setting these
Mhm.
boundaries and being there, and keep trying. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
hard.
It is hard. It is hard. And it comes at a time where I think before baby arrives, we have a different kind of uh, pot of resources, right? We're sleeping better. There's other things that aren't yet impacted by that extra layer. So when we imagine ourselves on the other side of it, we think of ourselves as carrying that same pot of resources. So, right? And then we get there and we're like, "Dang, I can't even find the words. I can't think straight. I have not slept in forever. I'm irritable." And if then you add on top of all that normally expected stuff that comes with hormone change and sleep deprivation and adjustment, massive adjustment. Um, if you also have any kind of mental health struggle on top of that, if we're talking postpartum anxiety or depression, this can just plummet you into feeling like all the things I thought I'd have the stamina for, I just don't. I got nothing. I'm just hanging by my fingernails, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And
Yeah, it's
it's
hard.
and that and that's kind of where sometimes the encouragement that I give and encouragement that I hear a lot of doctors kind of giving is reach out to a
Yeah.
therapist.
Yeah.
Just try it out. Like, not all therapists are the same, right?
Nope.
But I think sometimes you you need to say some of this out loud,
Yes.
and have that support, even if you don't think even if you think that you're fine. I see so many clients that, which I love and appreciate, they're like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, my doctor just suggested, that's part of a wellness because I'm pregnant
Mm-hmm.
right now, I should come and talk to a therapist. And the
Yeah.
beautiful thing about seeing a therapist that specializes with mothers
Mm-hmm.
is that I'm like, okay, yeah, let's talk about what's happening now, but also
Mm-hmm.
let's talk about the support. Now,
What's
let me tell
coming?
you, yeah,
Yeah.
let's talk about this, because that's not what's said in the baby classes. In the
Right.
baby classes, it's like, okay, let's practice the, the
Yeah, breathing,
breathing.
getting the baby
Okay,
out. Yeah.
that's
And
it.
then what? Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that you need this contraption or this thing, and
Yeah.
it's gonna help. Make sure you put on your registry because it's gonna
Yeah.
help and make having a baby easier. And
Yeah.
there's not so much. And I do think the conversation is shifting. I hear more of clients
Yeah.
coming in like, I'm pregnant and I
I'm
want
hearing that
to
too.
anticipate that.
Proactive. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that is beautiful. But I still
Mm.
think we still got to make more noise for it,
Yeah.
because I think one of the things is, even if you have the tools when you're pregnant before you give
Mhm.
birth, then you give birth. And like
Yeah.
you said, we're cut off at the knees.
Mm.
And what maybe you thought you had in place or what worked may not work.
Mhm.
And so then let's have these conversations again with either my partner or my loved ones of, hey, I know I said that I wanted this before, but
Yeah.
I actually don't. And that's okay. Like, it's
Yeah.
okay to have those conversations. There's nothing wrong with you,
Mm-mm.
or that you're doing anything that's going to disrupt the relationship if you change your mind. And I really, if there's one big thing that to get from this episode, is you can change your mind, and that
Yeah.
is okay. It's
Yes.
okay to change your mind. That's all motherhood. Change.
Yeah. It's
Just,
pivoting constantly.
that's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
If so, let's talk a bit about in the expecting stage. So we're expecting baby to arrive. We know there's only so much we can, it's so personal. We don't know really how we're going to respond, how we're going to feel on the other side. But doing this work, we see some patterns. We see some things that we kind of go, you know what? A lot of people experience these things in this
Mm.
way. How do we help people maybe not just proactively set stuff up, but have adjust our expectations? Like, what is on the more realistic side of what we think people should know when they
Mm.
arrive in the fourth trimester?
Well, I think the big one, right? We just said change. Big part of
Hmm.
motherhood is pivoting, parenthood is pivoting. But as an expectant parent, thinking about how am I going to anticipate support, how it might look like, what I might like, the first thing I often suggest is ask other parents, like, but honestly
Yeah.
ask other parents, like, not the parents that are like, everything is grand, it's going to be such a good time, because I
Yeah.
want to say, I think sometimes we forget, like, as
Yeah.
mother, I will even say for myself, like,
Yeah.
I will go to bat that my oldest, this is going to get TMI, but my
Yeah.
oldest, I used to breastfeed her. Well,
Yeah.
so her poop, I swear it smelled like popcorn. You could not argue with me about it. So I was like,
Yeah.
it's so sweet smelling. It's so sweet.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, second and third child, it was not sweet. I was like, what was I thinking? I forgot all about it. But all my pregnancy, I was like, it was such a sweet, but you
It was
forget.
lovely. The
Yes,
poop
it was.
was even lovely.
It wasn't. Look, it's not. It's not lovely. And obviously, as a therapist, I often will tell people, like, my baby, it was, this is my experience. But people
Yeah.
don't talk like that. People
No.
often say, like, oh, don't worry about it. They'll sleep the
Yeah.
whole time, or their poops are so precious, or whatever it is. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
use that silly example to be like, because even
Yeah.
in the most, like, I'm so aware of it. This is the work that I do. Even my brain has a
Yeah.
memory, like, stuck in there. But
Yeah.
everyone else around me is like, that is not what happened, Veronica. That's not it. That's not
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in the thing about asking other parents, if you have people around you, parents that they can be honest with you about their
Mhm.
experiences. Bonus points if they're in-laws that you trust, because you can see like how the grandparents are going
Yeah.
to be, or how how that's gonna play out. And
Mm.
I say that because sometimes there's things that so if I'm pregnant, like that I'm only thinking about based on what I see ads for, or what I see when I'm making my registry, or what I see at the doctors, that
Yep.
I'm not even thinking about the other things.
Right.
So that's one. The second thing I say is, because I'm a big believer in taking care of yourself after you give birth.
Mhm.
Not just with the regular care that comes with giving birth, but like actually, like for you, I think of
Yeah.
like, what is, explore for yourself, take a moment to acknowledge, like, what are ways that you want to be supported?
Mhm.
Like, what to you right now feels like, oh my gosh, like this is it,
What
right?
feeds you, what
Yeah,
replenishes you. Yeah, being able to name
yes.
that.
Because
Okay, yeah.
I think oftentimes we don't know,
No,
like,
no.
because we're so used to doing it. We,
Mhm.
before having kids, and I cannot speak for everyone, so this is a very generalized statement,
Yeah.
but, and this is also in my bias of before my life, before kids, but before I had
Mm.
kids, right? You have time to do things,
Yes.
and perhaps you did things that were for you that you didn't even realize that were for you.
Mhm.
Like they just felt good, and you just check, keep going, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so then you have a child, and that stops, and sometimes you can't even pinpoint, like, hey, what is it,
What
what,
was it that I was doing? Yeah.
yeah, because I
Yeah.
don't know. So before baby, let's talk about, really explore for yourself, sit down, what are the things that you like that replenish you, and nothing is off limits. Okay,
Mm.
is it that mani pedi, is it that meditation, is it that coffee? For
Yeah.
me, I will say
Yeah.
coffee is one of the
Coffee.
things.
I'm right there with you. Yeah.
Right? Is it that coffee?
Yeah.
Is it that that trip to, see your in-laws? Do you love the food that your in-law make? Is there a
Mhm.
specific food that brings a warm memory, right? That
Mm.
every time you eat it, maybe you didn't notice it, but like really take the time
Yeah.
to write it down. Nothing is off limits, but just make that list. Make just
Yeah.
have it there. Have it there.
Reference list.
Preferably
Yeah.
on your phone, because we all
Yeah.
got our phones and we're attached, and just have it
Yeah.
there, and know, hey, okay, so maybe after baby, obviously some things you may not want to do. You may not be thinking about getting a mani pedi right after you give birth. That's
Mhm.
fine. Or if you do, that's also fine too. Just want
Yeah.
to normalize that.
Yeah.
Um, but you can be clearer about thinking about what replenishes you, right? And then going with the same thing about what replenishes you, think about, like, go around your house and think of, what are the top chores that you do? What are the top things that you need to do
Mm.
to keep your home running? Like,
Yeah.
okay, so when I think of food, like that's a big one. That's a
Yeah.
big one.
The fridge has to be stocked.
The fridge has to be stocked, but
Yeah.
preferably with food that I can put in the oven or the microwave. Like,
Yes.
and I think, because sometimes we think it'll be fine. The baby will be here, and I'll whip up something really quick.
Uh-huh. No.
It's hard to whip up something. What you thought was
Yeah.
really quick, now you're thinking, what did I put in this? The eggs are burned because, baby cried and you stepped
Distracted.
away,
Exactly. Yeah.
and so food is one. So I always give examples of that one.
Yeah.
Uh, if you really have a preference for a clean home, right? Who do you trust to actually come into your home?
Right.
As it is. Not many of us have a lot of people that we say, you know what, come on over
Mm.
just as I am. So most of
Mhm.
us, hide things, if, depending on how clean your house is, or,
Yeah.
you have to do that express cleaning, right?
Yeah.
I had this conversation right now brings about, I had a client once who said she she had just given birth and had come home from the hospital, and someone was going to come help her. Someone was going to come help her watch the baby. She was on the floor cleaning her floorboards, like in the
Oh.
bathroom,
Oh, my goodness.
because she like went to the restroom,
Yeah.
and she was like, it looks like a mess in here. This person is going to notice that it's a
Right.
mess, right?
Hmm.
And my heart goes to her, because I
Yeah.
remember
The
that feeling. I
burden of
remember
that. Yeah.
that, of when people would come, I'd be like, oh my god,
Yeah.
and so when thinking of as an expectant parent, I, I like to say, while you're in that third trimester, because now you're getting a little bit heavier, you're moving a little bit slower. Think
Yeah.
about what are the things that are starting to get a little bit harder for you to do. Is it harder to put meals together?
Mhm.
Is it harder to kind of clean up some things? Do you have another child? That's another
Yep.
thing too. Do you
Right.
have another child? Who do you
Mhm.
trust to take this child to the park that will
Yes.
play with them, get down with them?
Yeah.
Do you have an animal? Do you have a dog that needs to go for walks? Okay, once you have a
Right.
baby, I'm not saying that you can't do it. The
Yep.
beautiful thing about, not okay, quote unquote, preparing or thinking about these things is like, I just want you to, in a very non-pressured way, just make a list of these things so that
Mhm.
you have it as reference, of when someone asks, like, how can I help you? You got a dog?
Yeah.
Can you please go walk my
Yeah.
dog?
Yeah.
Can you please go walk my dog?
That's
Or
brilliant.
so,
It's
yeah.
the difference between the automatic, right? I hear that
Hmm.
kind of idea that before, when we don't have to be so intentional about it, it's just kind of like it develops because we get feedback to our bodies that, oh, that felt good, we're just going to follow that, and it becomes part of our lifestyle that we take for granted. And as soon as something kind of overrides that or pulls it from us, then we actually to we're confused.
Hmm.
Like, why are we so overwhelmed? Why am I so tired? It's not just because you're sleep deprived, it's because you're not getting anything that recharges you either. And
Hmm.
if people can't name what those things are, you can't be intentional about them. How are you going to
Yeah.
plug those in or get outsource it to
Hmm.
somebody? Or
Hmm.
yeah, just the ability to name it. And you named some really concrete things that I think are prime examples of things that people just assume will just continue. And I think, like, okay, let's take the baby out of the picture. If somebody said, your lifestyle currently consists of A, B, and C, and you're not working in a paid position in an office, and then the next day you start full time at an office on top of all the other things you're doing, you're not going to expect of yourself that everything else stays at the same standard when 45 hours of your week are spent in an office building, not being able to attend to that. And so we're
Hmm.
like this, I think there's some stigma attached to it in the sense of like when it's family related, we think it's just adding another human into the house, but we don't really wrap our heads around how oriented we need to be to that new human and how
Hmm.
everything else does take a back seat.
Yeah.
Right? It's
Yeah.
not by choice. I can't just say, oh, yeah, well, I'm going to make sure that happens. Well, what are you going to do? Just ignore the baby? Like, I mean, we're really at the time in the moment, right? And so being really
Hmm.
planful makes so much sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, and why I think it's important to start naming or start thinking about this and naming this before baby is because even if you forget about it, it will be in your mind of like,
Yeah.
hey, like I have something. I
Yep.
still have a list of things that I need.
Mm.
Um, so if someone asks me, because it's very much a skill to say, oh yes, I say, how can I help you? Oh yes, thank
Yeah.
you.
I'm
I really
prepared
need
to
this.
answer that.
It's hard. It's
Okay.
hard.
It is. Yeah.
I the super mom kicks in. Like, I don't worry, I got this.
Yeah.
So I got that list of like, you know what? Actually, I have been meaning to do this. Can
Yeah.
you please help me with this?
Yeah.
And so having that, just it's again bringing to your awareness of the things that you might need help with, and I mean, and also acknowledge like maybe some of those things you put on your list that you thought were going to be important are nothing important.
That's
And
totally true.
that's all right. That's
Yep.
okay,
Yeah.
because at least you're starting to think of that conversation and
Yeah.
starting to think about what you might need,
Mm.
because we need support as parents. It's
Yep.
why I love, podcasts such as yours, where we're able to really normalize and talk about this,
Hmm.
because parenthood is not meant to be alone. It's not meant to
Right.
be alone. You're not
No.
meant to do this all by yourself.
Yeah.
So it might look
Yeah.
different for everyone, but
Yeah.
we need support.
So on the topic of trying to understand, like, we don't always know what we need until we've arrived there. So we can do our best to kind of be aware of some of the things that could come up. When we arrive on the other side of babies in our arms now and reality has hit, it's my reality that's hit, right? So I have to be able to name that. And it's one thing being able to identify it myself, but it's another thing being able to articulate it to the people that you want in your village. So, how do we do that? I think that's a big struggle. People don't know how to word it, they don't know how to approach it, they don't know how to person center it. So, like, I know what my mom's buttons are, so I don't want to ask her that because I know she'll take that offensively or whatever. Or, I have one best friend I tell everything to. This is something I can say. I'm just going to be real down to earth and honest about
Mhm.
this is hard for me. Like, this
Yes.
sucks. Like, I'm not loving this. And there's
Mhm.
another friend that you would not say that to because you can kind of anticipate in that relationship what feedback you're going to get back and if it's helpful or not. How do we do that? Like, that's a lot of mental load to try and figure that out.
It is. It is, and unfortunately, it's one of those things that you don't know who you can have those conversations with
Mhm.
until you have that
You test
conversation
it.
and
Yeah.
you see what that's like, right? And
Yeah.
so when I think of, and this is even before setting the boundary, let's say you're wanting, you know, your mom or or a family friend or someone from the church to come and provide a little bit more of relief, maybe in your house, right? And like,
Yeah.
you just please come over with a home cooked meal,
Yeah.
please.
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah.
please come and hold this baby or whatever it
Yes.
is, right?
Mhm.
And they're not doing it,
Yep.
right? So the first thing I want to say is breathe, take a moment,
Mhm.
okay? Because already, anyone listening, even myself, like when I'm thinking about, okay, I need to have this conversation,
Mhm.
like sometimes our internal voice is like, you know what, it's okay. I really don't need that home cooked meal
Yeah.
that much.
We
I'm
minimize it.
I'm okay. You know what?
Yeah.
I'm okay. I was just having a bad day yesterday,
Yeah.
so that's why. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna say breathe and acknowledge that happens. We do try to psych ourselves out.
Yep.
And so take a moment to just breathe. Then I want you, so I'm a big paper and pen kind of gal. I know
Yep.
people like things differently, but I really want you to identify what is it that you want. It is easy
Mm.
to communicate to someone if you can give them a concrete thing of what it is that you want.
Good call. Yeah.
You telling me I want support. Well,
Yeah.
what does
Too
support?
vague.
Yes, like
Yeah.
what does support mean like? And
Mm.
my heart goes out to you and to moms or even just for myself when we're in that space of like I need support but we don't know what it is. Like
Mhm.
there is, I also want to say, like, if you're in that place, that doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. It's just
No,
you're
no,
in
no.
the pre-play, the pre-communication
Yeah.
phase of you're just
Yeah.
like, I don't know what that support looks like.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna push you a little bit and I'm gonna say, just name
Yeah.
something that you think that would make yourself feel better. Did you
Yeah.
see on Instagram that somebody had their mom bring them a home cooked meal? Let's try it out. Let's see if
Mhm.
that's what that is. Did you
Yeah.
see that, you know someone came and went on a walk with you because you want to get outside more, but you're kind of nervous about being outside with a baby, and did you see that you're like, I wish I could do that?
Mhm.
Okay,
Mhm.
let's try it out. Let's see, because that's supportive too. Going on a
Yeah.
walk with me with my
Yeah.
baby, right? So if you're struggling, if you're in that place where you're really struggling to identify what it is that looks like support, look at the things that your heart kind of tugs at, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
give it a try. So
Yeah.
now we've identified what it is. We're taking a
Yep.
breath. We've identified what it is that we want. Now I want you to practice it. Practice saying
Hmm.
what it is that you want to say.
Hmm.
So if it is, I'm looking at you, I'm going to pick up the phone. Maybe I got that butterfly feeling.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm feeling like, the sweaty palms.
Uh-huh.
I want you acknowledge that that's your body. That's your
Yeah.
body talking. But you can still do things despite what your body is saying. Okay?
Mhm.
You are not in danger. Right? And it's hard. It's
Yeah.
hard to set this back. It does
Yeah.
get easier with time and time that you
It's the
practice and set this.
practice, right? Our body needs to rehearse that to
Yeah, yeah,
realize it's safer than our brains are telling us it
yeah,
is.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, because you also got to remember, this is how amazing, talking about this before I say my communication and boundary, like our
Yeah.
mind is so powerful that anything that it perceives that can cause us to make us feel bad or to like give us a, is like, no, 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 let me look, just
Retreat.
don't do
Don't
it.
do it.
Don't do it. Okay. It's like that person in the movie. Don't do
Save
it.
yourself. That's right.
And
Run for the hills.
but okay, the thing is, you'll never know what it's like on the
Yeah.
other end.
Yeah.
It's only perceiving what it's going to be like. We all do
Right.
this. We
Yeah.
so normalizing that. So I breathe. I practice. Okay, I want to ask Karen to go on a walk with me with my baby. That's what I want her to do. Okay, so I practice. I literally practice out loud. Practice with your partner, because I'm sure
Yeah.
your partner will hype you up and will
Yeah.
say, I hope your partner, but if they
Yeah.
don't, then still look at yourself in the mirror and practice what it is.
Mm.
Pick up the phone or text or whatever, whichever way you're communicating this,
Yes.
pick it up the
Yeah.
phone, right? Are you still shaking? Okay. You can acknowledge, I'm
Mm.
really nervous to say this, Karen.
Mm.
I'm really nervous. Okay. You probably say like, okay, Veronica, what is it? Talk to me. I
Yeah.
was wondering if I know that you have Wednesdays free. I was wondering if you could come on a walk with me with the baby. I've been really struggling with getting out of the house, and I know how much you love to. I'm gonna pick my local place. I know how much you love the
Yeah.
Rose Bowl. Just wondering, can you come on a walk with me?
Mm.
That's it. And then don't say anything. Then don't say anything. That's it. Just
Yeah.
wait. Which is
Yeah.
hard
I
because you're
know.
like, you try
You're
to
like, oh
justify it.
no, get back. Take
And
it
then
back. Actually, I don't need it. I'm fine.
yeah, that's fine.
The
You know what? I'm
hesitation.
okay.
Yeah.
And then what happens is the other person is left with, okay, okay, then
Yeah,
it
you're
looks like
fine.
you're
No.
fine. Yeah,
No, no.
okay. Well, you let me know when
Yeah,
you
yeah,
want.
yeah.
Yeah, and then
Ball
you're
back in
like,
your court.
yeah, you're like,
Crap.
oh, okay, okay,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Um, so twiddle those thumbs, sit on your hands, put mute on your phone,
Yeah.
let them talk.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we'll be surprised at what our support will say. Often
Yeah.
they'll say yes,
Mhm.
or maybe you'll say, you know what, I can't next Wednesday, but actually I have a space on Tuesday morning. Do you think that would
Yeah.
work? Well, yeah,
Yeah.
I just had a baby. Of course it will work.
Yeah.
Let's get out there,
Yeah. I'm around. I'll take whatever.
right?
Yeah.
Um, and then repeat this as necessary.
Yeah.
Repeat
Yeah.
this as necessary because
Mm.
communicating these needs is not always going to be on one round. You're going to get it. Like
Mhm.
it takes time,
Yeah.
and that's okay.
Well,
So
and I think what's lovely about that approach is it's present and in the moment because we can't always predict what we're going to need when we need it. And we have to kind of learn a way of being with ourselves to let ourselves give permission to flex, when to pivot, to change, to recognize, well, what I needed last week is not what I need this week. And that's okay. As soon as we feel guilt about that, or what, like I asked for it yesterday, but now actually it feels like a burden to me to receive that. It's those conversations that I think feel extra stressful. Like I already asked for something, I went out on a limb, and then we got to the day and I'm like, I'm in so much pain. I can't walk. I know
mhm,
I asked you for that, but it feels then that ungrateful tone again of, oh,
mhm.
I feel so bad because I said, so then we grin and bear it. And really, like, I think we forget that people want to give us what we need when we're in
Mhm.
right relationship with each other. So
Yes.
those, it's not a burden to somebody necessarily to change your mind. We assume that it will be, when in actual fact, if we dare say, actually, this isn't going to work, 9 out of 10 times that person's going to go, that's not a problem. I don't need the walk. I'm fine pivoting. I'll show up with a meal instead. Let's sit on your couch.
Yes. Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Yes, yes. And as you were saying that, I was thinking of this meme I think I saw of, and maybe you'll relate to it, when you have a planned night out and then like everyone cancels that same night and you're like, yes, I just
Yeah.
wanted to
Relief.
stay in. Like you're like, is this
Yeah.
too much? This is pretty much what it is. Okay. It's
Yeah.
like that. It's like other
Yeah.
people are probably thinking the same thing, but
Same
like
thing.
you
Yeah.
get so nervous about being the one to be like,
I don't want to disappoint.
actually, yes.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
in reality, that person's probably on the other side, like, oh, thank goodness, let's
Yeah.
just
Yeah. Yeah.
stay in, you know.
Totally.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I like exactly what you said about like in right relationships, because that's
Yeah.
also a thing to remember, especially when having these conversations or even when setting boundaries with others. It's like you can't make other people support you in the way that you want.
Right. Right.
I know that that's harsh sometimes to hear,
Mhm.
but it's true. Like,
Yeah.
we can
We don't
only
get that
tell
control.
people, yeah, we
Mhm.
cannot control people. And
Mhm.
so we can only tell people what works for us. We can show them, but ultimately they have their own choice of how they can show up for you.
Yeah.
And so if you're having this conversation with someone, so kind of talking about, like, I asked you out for a walk and you're like, yeah, no, I can't,
Mhm.
right? Okay, it stings. Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Because here you were trying a different thing and, like, it
Yeah.
stings. But then let's pivot. Let's find someone else. Let's find another way of doing this.
Mm.
And I know it hurts. I know in those
Yeah.
early days, actually, honestly, I'm not even gonna say early, that first year of parenthood, you're
Yeah.
very vulnerable.
Yeah.
So asking for help is really hard, and just doing anything outside of this is anything of being vulnerable is difficult.
Yeah.
But if that person can't give it to you, or if that relationship is not right, like, okay, let's take a
Yeah.
breath. My heart is with you.
Yeah.
Let's pivot. Let's see
Right.
where else we
Try
can get that need
elsewhere.
met. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I'm also want to pay attention to it's attached to this, but the relationship care, we don't want to lose our people. And I think sometimes there's a number of ways that I think it changes, and it happens kind of naturally and people don't even know it's happening. But I
Mhm.
don't know if you know, if you felt this, but I remember, and now I'm hyper. It's like when you buy a new car and then you see that car everywhere. Like, I never knew that one existed, but now it's like everybody and their dog has
Yep.
that car.
Yep.
You just become really aware of it. And I remember in my own experience of nobody said hi to me when they came over. They went straight for the baby. So the baby's
Mhm.
head is like right beside mine. I'm holding
Yes.
baby,
Oh.
and they come in, oh, hello, right? And I'm like dying right beside, right? Like, you do not see me. You do
Yeah.
not see this kind of
Yeah.
half dead person right beside. It's so, you feel so second, right? And
Mhm.
so that's one way in which that just changes the dynamics in relationship, because you don't feel like priority anymore. You might feel invisible. You might feel sidestepped or overpowered. They might just say, hey, I'm going to do this for you. And it's hard to say, actually, that's not good for me, because
Mhm.
they look like they're trying to be helpful and they just
Just
take
like
over.
that.
They've got their own rules about how baby's going to sleep and what that they're going to eat. And let me just take the
Yes.
baby for, for a walk. And like, what if you're not comfortable with that? And
Uh-huh.
just the relationship care is hard. And I think about that in family relationships, but also in your own home. How
Mm.
much changes in your couple relationship, and you could be so determined that that is going to stay a priority, but man, that takes a whole lot of intentional work to keep it top of mind and to make that important, to keep it important.
Yeah.
Can you talk a bit about that, some of the layers there?
Well, one, I want to say I was with you there. That was
Yeah,
an
yeah.
experience that I had too. And I think a lot of parents, especially mothers, have, especially because you go from being pregnant, like, oh, let me touch the belly, which already is a
Yep,
problematic thing. So
yep.
that's a different day. But
Uh-huh.
that you go from that to
Invasive. Yeah, you're not your own body anymore. Right.
no. And then you go to not being acknowledged
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah.
And I think we tell ourselves, well, it's selfish to want that. It's
Yep.
selfish to
We do tell
want.
ourselves that.
When
Yeah.
in reality, it's like you need to also show up for yourself. Like you
Mhm.
also need love and care. Like,
Yeah, you matter.
birth is a big experience.
Yeah.
Like, you could
Yeah.
have the most perfect birth ever. It's
Yeah.
still
It's
a
still
big
massive. Yeah.
experience.
Yeah.
And so it's very vulnerable. It's
Yeah.
and so coming in, breaking down to, like, relationships at home,
Mhm.
right? I think oftentimes relationships are take the hardest hit because you're used to a certain dynamic.
Mhm.
Maybe there was one person that loved to cook, book, or there was
Yeah.
one person that loved to do this, or was a
Yes.
night owl, or was the early riser, or always did everything. Whichever way, it's not like a
Mhm.
baby to be like, oh yes,
You're
no,
right.
this happy
Yeah, I'm
couple.
here now.
Let me let me just go. And I also want to name that is why the first year of having a baby is the hardest.
Mhm.
A
Yep.
lot of people get a divorce in the first
Yes.
year. So
It's
if it's
hugely
tough,
impactful.
it's
Yeah.
huge. So if
Yeah.
you're listening to this and you're like, oh my gosh, is it just my marriage? Is it just my partnership?
Yeah,
No, it's not.
exactly. Yeah.
No, it's not.
Right.
It is so tough. And
Yeah.
um so with that, right, when you're noticing that your relationship is shifting, right, whether it's like in your partnership or you know, in families, one thing I often encourage is like acknowledge that feeling,
Mhm.
acknowledge what it is that you're feeling.
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay, because guilt and shame tells us
Yep.
don't pay attention to it, just push it to the side.
Yeah.
And I want you to say the opposite. I would say,
Yeah.
look, I heard it on a
Yeah.
podcast, let
There's
me just
yeah.
acknowledge where I'm at.
Yeah.
And where I'm at is that's what I'm feeling. I feel like
Mhm.
I'm only a milk machine, or I
Yeah.
feel like I'm
I'm
just a diaper
overcharged.
changer, or
Yeah.
I just feel like it's all about the baby, or
Yep.
whatever it is. And I will say it is all about the baby in the beginning. Like
Mhm.
it's a lot, right?
Yeah.
And there is a lot to be grateful for. So
Mm.
this is not meant to be a
Mhm.
non-great gratitude, but also why the first year is so difficult is because we push off taking care of ourselves. We
Yeah.
push off ourselves. We say, no, it's okay. I'll handle it. It's okay. You can only handle so much.
Yeah.
So I want you to acknowledge what it is that you're feeling. And let's have a conversation with this.
Yeah.
This doesn't have to be an elaborate, like 30-page, you know, thing. It's, you know what? Hey, hun, I sometimes just feel like I'm just a milk machine. That's
Mhm.
it.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't know where to go from there. That's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
But part of relationships is of being able to have these conversations or say
Mhm.
that. If
Mhm.
you find that you can't have this with your partner, let's talk to a girlfriend.
Yeah.
Let's talk to someone else of like, you know what? Hey, Karen, like, man, I just nursed for 6 hours.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like my boobs hurt. You know,
Yeah.
I can't. I,
Yeah.
that's it.
It's the
Is there?
honesty, hey? Like,
Yeah.
where are your safe spaces for honesty?
Yes.
Can you be transparent because that will save you, right? Like, it'll
Mm,
save your soul in a sense of like that internal agony comes from not being seen, heard, understood, validated, witnessed. And
yes.
people can't witness that if you're pretending you're fine
Mm-hmm.
when you're
Yeah.
not.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I also want to
Mm.
acknowledge the thing about also the first year I mentioned about nursing. You might
Yeah.
be fine one day. Nothing
That's
like
right.
day
It's
two.
variable. Like,
And day two, you're like, nope, I'm burning down the house. Like, and
ah,
I also want to say, yeah, in those early days, it's
yeah.
very much real. It's real.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's another thing about relationship is like being able to show up honesty, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when I'm calling my girlfriend and I'm like, hey, I felt this way, and she calls me
Yeah.
the next day and I'm like,
Yeah.
you know what, I feel a little bit better. I realized that I just needed
Uh-huh.
some sleep or
Perspective.
whatever it was.
Right. Right.
Then you want your friend to say, oh, okay,
Yeah.
yeah, I
It's
get it.
just
You're
where
in
you're
this.
at.
And
I
that's
had a
where we're at.
girlfriend who she was overdue, and in those days she was just so done. And so she kept saying, she's like, I got no words. All I have to say is get this baby out of me. And then the baby was out for 2 days. So day two reminded me of this. Second day, she calls and she's like, put the baby back in me.
Yes, there it
Because,
is. There it is. And good friendships is like, yeah,
yeah,
yeah, that's true. Because if
totally.
I heard that,
Both
I'll
are
be like,
true.
yes,
Yep.
yes, you know. And so
Yeah.
find your safe spaces and again, but you're not going to truly know. I mean, yes, you may know with your partner, you may know certain girlfriends or
Yeah.
people, right? Or family, you may expect them to be one way and
Yeah.
then they're not.
Yep. Not. Yep.
Then with that, I want to say, okay, take a breath and let's pivot, right?
Yeah.
Give people grace. I mean, sometimes
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a therapist and I don't always show up the best way for
Yeah.
my friend. I might
Yep.
be having a bad day. So okay,
Yep.
one time, okay. But if this continues to happen, if you notice, like
Hmm.
here I am coming in these spaces, trying to have these conversations about
Yeah.
myself and what I need and how I'm feeling, and I'm feeling just a lot of rejection or dismissing or all
Yeah,
these
you're
things,
not there for me. Yeah.
then
Yeah.
let's pivot. Let's
Yeah.
pivot. And when I say pivot, I'm not saying like ignore it
Mhm.
or any of that, but I do also want to encourage that, like, you got to acknowledge your bandwidth in those
Yes.
early.
Yep.
Let's pick it. I should have to say the first year. And you got
Yep.
to acknowledge your bandwidth of like what you can tackle, right? So if
Yeah.
you
Be
notice that a
realistic
friend
about
or a
that.
family is not the way you want, okay, let's pivot. We can address that in another
Yep.
day, right?
Yep.
Um, and this just reminds me of, as we're talking about pivoting, is I have I had someone who was telling me like their partner did not believe in like carrying the little baby, like he just came out really small, like just really
Okay.
small.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it wasn't until he kind of beefed up a little bit
Yep.
that
Mhm.
he kind of felt
Felt
comfortable,
comfortable. Yeah.
right? Because
That's
the baby
common.
was a preemie, and so
Yep.
really small,
So
and
fragile
so
looking. Yeah.
and so once the baby beefed up a little bit,
Mm.
then all the other stuff, how she thought her husband was going to show up was the way
Yeah.
that he showed up.
Came.
And
Okay.
so, was that okay? No, how he
Yeah.
showed up in the. But I
Yeah.
think also we got to acknowledge that sometimes, again, we can't control people. We can't make
Yeah.
people support us in the way that we like.
Yeah.
The only thing we can do is tell them, and then if they don't show up in the way we want, let's pivot. Then we'll address that another day.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
So.
this is where the honesty helps, because if you preemptively set the conversation quality to be open between you, then when those things show up, you're just providing the same open template to that conversation. I'm noticing you're not holding the baby. I really expected that you'd, like, all I know of you is that you would hold babies. I've never seen you be scared of this. Like, what's happening for you? If you can open that up, and if the other person can be forthright about, dang, like this is not what I thought, and I'm going to do damage if I touch my own baby. Like, that's terrifying. It's not malintent.
Mhm.
It's trying to preserve safety. But if
Yeah.
you can name that honestly, then you help each other out. Then you can say,
Yes.
"Oh, okay, well if that's what's happening for you, let me show you how to do this." Or let's
Mhm.
hold the baby together, or there's things you can, there's things you can learn from a midwife or a doula about how to do this aftercare. Or there's people to ask, but if you sit in the silence, you wait until that phase is over and the hurt happens, right?
Yeah.
The
Yes.
distance happens, the resentment happens, the all the stuff you don't want to grow between you starts to
Happens.
grow because you just didn't name what you felt.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. You talked a bit about self-care. We do need to wrap up our conversation, but I wanted to end on the note of honoring ourselves.
Mhm.
And um and I and I, I wanted to kind of ask you what are the things that come up for you that you think are most honoring? I know we've talked about, like, listen to yourself. It's okay to need things. That's acceptable and right. It's good to stay needing things. You're still
Mhm.
human. You're still
Mhm.
valuable. Um, is there anything beyond that that we need to kind of remember for our own true honoring of ourselves and our self care?
Yeah, I want to remind you that you are always changing. So what is
Yeah.
self-care today may not be self-care
Yeah.
tomorrow.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
remembering this piece of not only just listening to yourself, but remembering that you are always changing and evolving.
Mm.
So is your child. So is your journey in this parenthood journey, and that
Yeah.
is beautiful. That is it.
Yeah.
That's where we're at. And then when I think of self-care, right? Like can we care for ourselves? Two distinct ways of how I would identify self-care come up. So the first is basic needs. In those early
Yeah.
days, a shower
Oh,
really
yeah.
is it.
Uh-huh.
Okay?
Gold. Yeah.
It really is. That face mask alone,
Uh-huh.
it really is it. Is it that walk? But a solo walk is,
Uh-huh.
that cup of
Silence.
coffee. Yes. Like,
Yes.
you know, I think
Mhm.
sometimes we think self care needs to be something elaborate, and
Yep.
it doesn't have to be. It just has to be the thing that just grounds you, right? And
Yes.
so taking the time to acknowledge, in those early days, in those early months, perhaps self-care is not going to look like how it was before. Maybe before you were out there, I don't know, tasting different wines. You like love this
Yeah.
and that was great.
Yeah.
Okay. That's great. We're going to have to
Yeah.
kind of get you back to that, right?
Yeah.
So self-care, I think of basic needs. So then the second thing I think of is when I think of self-care or different type is like after the dust has settled,
Mm.
after we're getting a little bit more comfortable in this,
Yeah.
right?
Find our track. Yeah.
Yes. Self-care to me comes what brings you alive? What
Nice.
what
That's good.
replenishes you,
Yeah.
right? So I think of, for example, I love running. This is what I do. This is when I solve all my problems is through a run.
Okay, you
Okay.
lost me already there because that was the
But
opposite for me. This is why it's
so
personalized and it's all
yeah,
good.
yeah. Right. So
That's
that's it.
torture to me.
That's
Yeah.
me. I'm sitting there and I'm
Okay.
solving it. I'll be
Yeah.
there, right?
Yeah.
But what brings me alive is when I sign up to do a race. Now we've been in a COVID
Okay.
pandemic for some time, so I haven't
Yeah.
done one in a while. Priorities
Yeah.
have shifted. My little ones are
Yeah.
really little.
Yeah.
But as soon as I feel comfortable and I'm able, I
Mm.
want to get back out there. I
Mm.
loved meeting up on Saturdays. Like I said, it's all me, right? Doing
Yeah.
those long
Yeah.
runs and just like,
Yeah.
hey, let's talk about that. Just
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
smiling with my headphones, just having a grand old time and getting there on race
Mm.
day. That brings me alive. There's nothing
Okay.
like running across that finish line. Like,
Yeah.
dang, I did this,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So but again, in the early days, I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't got time for that.
I
I'm
know.
trying to survive. I'm trying to
Right.
survive.
Right.
So there's
Different
two
kind of
different kinds of
self-care.
self-care.
Yeah,
There's the
for
basic
sure.
needs, the things that you
Yeah.
need to refill
Yeah.
you every day. So that
Mhm.
run that I'm talking about does refill me on a consistent basis,
Yeah.
right? That's it. But self-care in the grand schemer of things, grand schemer, I'm making up words.
Yeah.
Grand
Yeah.
scheme of things
Yeah.
is that signing up for that race and training for it. And
Yeah.
so identifying that it takes time you need to give energy to both, but it takes time to do that. So,
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you. We sure covered a whole lot. Well done. Like that. Yeah. Okay. I wish everybody who is listening, who is in this, that they feel honored, seen, and I hope they feel understood and normal. I hope they feel normal. I hope
yes.
people see themselves in some of this conversation and say, okay, it's not just me. It's not just me. So thank you for joining me and providing that experience for people. And beyond that, if they move into the other version of self-care, what I wish for them is a sense of aliveness again. Yeah.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. This was such a great conversation.
Great. Have a good afternoon.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.